Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to God Factory Wingmen. If you've ever played Star Wars Battlefront 2, you'll recall the space battles that you could have. These involve fights between two teams, each having its own capital ship trying to take the others down. You can do this either from the outside through fighters or bombers, or from the inside by landing inside the hangar and taking out core systems on foot. God Factory is, in essence, a revival of this mode, with one core concept removed. You cannot exit your ship. This means that there are no land battles, you can't land inside the hangar, and you're stuck to dogfighting and bombing the ship. However, the ship does have internals and you can fly into the ship and take out systems from the inside as well. The developer has done a great job of fleshing out these base mechanics, though the game itself is not without its flaws. You start the match by picking out two of your ships to take with you into combat. These are the only two ships you can use for the entirety of the match, and the game plays out depending on what your team strategy is, though the core goal remains the same. You'll notice at the top of the screen that there are two timers and two health bars. The health bars indicate the integrity of each capital ship, and the timer indicates when each ship will fire upon the other. Upon firing, the enemy ship's integrity is reduced by 1 pip, and naturally getting to 0 pips results in a loss for the team. Now, while both ships fire upon each other simultaneously, there are ways to push ahead and gain an advantage for your team. How you go about doing this depends on what strategy your team is using, which in turn will dictate which of the core systems on the enemy ship you take out first. Each system taken down imposes a restriction upon the enemy, as well as reducing the capital ship's health by 1 pip. The exception to this being that the core, if taken down, reduces by 2 pips instead. The developers were very creative how they impose these restrictions upon taking down a core system. For example, destroying the radar will grant the enemy team misinformation or delayed information on their minimap. Taking out the ammo repair stations prevents your enemies from being repaired all the way, or from them being filled up with ammo all the way. I believe the cut's 20%, which is quite significant, so 20% less shields or 20% less ammo given, depending on which station you take out. Now, to do the most damage, you'll want to target either the shield generator or the hull. While the hull does not regenerate health, it does have, I believe, almost double the amount of health that any other core system has. However, you can attack the hull from any part of the ship that's not a core system. This makes it extremely hard to defend. Destroying the hull not only reduces the capital ship's health by 1 pip, it also increases all damage to other core systems by 20%, which is fairly significant. You'll notice many of the core systems being surrounded by orange shields. You can get rid of these by destroying the shield generator. However, destroying the shield generator not only reduces the capital ship's health by 1 pip, it also opens way to the core, which upon destruction, as I've said, reduces it by 2 integrity points. However, it's worth noting that both the core and the shield generator are located within the ship, making piloting slightly harder than flying in free space. As I've said earlier, both capital ships fire upon each other simultaneously. Your team can avoid this by taking out the enemy ship's main cannon. Upon taking out the cannon, it fires every 5 minutes instead of 3 minutes, giving your team quite a sizable advantage with regards to time. To give you an idea of the strategies your team could employ, you could all attack the cannon, take it out, and then pull back and be on the defensive. Play the waiting game and let your capital ship do all the work. All you have to do is hold out until all 7 pips have been taken down. Naturally, your ship will not take as much damage, seeing as how the enemy ship will be firing every 5 minutes instead of 3. Now, while this half of the game works incredibly well, I believe the second half of the game falls slightly short. Now, don't get me wrong, it is well crafted, incredibly so. It just has some counterintuitive mechanics that work against each other, in my opinion. The building system, for example, is incredibly well crafted on one hand. As you level, you gain credits and rank. The rank lets you access higher tiers of weaponry and gear, while the credits lets you buy these. The gear has all sorts of stats that you want to try and balance out or push or gain more damage or more speed or maneuverability or any number of things, and it's really well rounded. You can build any type of ship you could imagine. The weapon system is even more in depth. You get a whole load of different weapons, from auto-targeting to machine guns to lock-on missiles or bombs or mines or any number of things, and some weapons can even be shared across the game's 4 races. Individual weapons and parts even have their own tiers. These tiers are unlocked as you play and use the part, which means that a lower tier weapon can deal more damage than a higher tier weapon simply because you've used it more and have access to the higher tier variant. And on top of all of this, individual weapons have their own damage types, which means you want to try and combo these with either yourself between your primary and secondary weapons, or between your team to try and deal the most damage possible through combos. Now, on the one hand, I feel like this is incredibly cool stuff, but on the other hand, I feel like it hardly mattered at all. This is because at lower levels ships are pretty damn weak, especially compared to higher level players. I felt like I was continuously doing absolutely no damage to any of the enemies, and it's not a good feeling to have. It makes me want to stop playing the game, but of course I have to keep playing because I have to give you guys a balanced view. Honestly, I enjoy this game. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I've been wanting to play a space combat game for quite some time and decided to slog through all the grinding bits because I did want to get to the good content hidden behind all the levels and credits and whatnot. It's worth noting that I never felt like I needed credits, that I ever ran out of credits, and I've been spending it pretty frivolously. So what it comes down to, for me at least, is levels, and the level difference between a new player and someone who's playing this game for quite some time. What you do have to consider is that this is a multiplayer only online indie game, and while that's not a death sentence, it is kind of shooting yourself in the foot. I've been doing these reviews for a fair amount of time now, and I've seen more than a handful of indie multiplayer games just drop down into obscurity simply because they can't keep up an active player base. Hell, you could probably even pick out a number of videos that I've done that the games have sort of just died off. And it's not like the devs haven't been trying. I've seen them try a whole number of things. I've seen them do weekly, daily events even, and I've even seen some give out basically free copies of the game to anyone who would have it, and the games still haven't picked up any. It's just a curse, if you would, of indie multiplayer games. Unless you're a big name, it's hard to keep up in this sort of genre. When you're dealing with games like this, with levels and gear that's level dependent, veterans, people who really enjoy the game, people who keep playing because they enjoy the game, become a lot more apparent, and it's daunting to a new player to play against these people because they have all the gear and all the experience on top of everything else they've done. But the devs I've seen have actively tried to combat this. There are bots you can play against, you can do practice matches that locks other players out so you could level. That's how I caught up and got to a relatively decent level, allowing me to get some decent ships. You can level lock games, which means you lock out players that are too high rank or too low rank, which I think is really good, but again, without the player base it doesn't really mean much. Right now I've seen about 20 to 30 players, 40 players maximum, play the game at any one time, and you're still having to wait for games even in the quick match menu. Anyways, moving on to the actual combat of the game, it's fun. It's incredibly fun. I played with the controller and I enjoyed it. However, there are some minor gripes I do have with the game. If you are playing with the joystick controller, you do have to bind your keys, and they have this key binder thing where it goes through all the buttons and you just have to press them along the way. It would be nice if everything was auto-bound to begin with, but that's, it's a minor inconvenience. What's not a minor inconvenience is the fact that in tutorials it labels the keys as press joy 4 or press joy axis 7 or whatever, and it's not ideal, not in the slightest, especially when learning the game with complex mechanics such as this. You may have noticed all the stunts you could pull with your ship, and this is due to the movement key. The movement key is a modifier, and as soon as you press it and press any of your movement directional keys, for example if you hit the movement key and forwards you do a forwards dash, movement key and back and you do a backflip. Left and right allow you to turn 90 degrees, and if you hold the key it allows you to drift, and what it does is it changes your view, so your ship will face whatever direction you turn, but you will keep moving in the direction you were moving in for a little while until your engines kick up again or until you let go of the key. This allows you to follow targets really well, and it's an excellent system. What's not an excellent system is the drones, and as I've said before, you get to bring only 2 ships with you into combat. Now, you have to consider that these are ships you've been building for a fair amount of time. You've been leveling this whole time, you've been unlocking gear, you've been using the gear, and you finally get to put it into your ship, and you have this very powerful ship. As soon as it gets destroyed, however, it gets replaced with the drone, and a drone is a very base ship. It's no fun to play at all, and I don't understand, after all this money and time you've spent building these ships, they get taken away the moment they're destroyed. It stops anything risky happening, and a lot of players, at least what I've seen, or what I do in fact, is I don't risk it. There's no reason to risk it in case of losing your ship. As soon as you're half out, whatever, you just sprint back into the docks, and you see people in the video, if you go back and check, that they basically sprint. They use their boosters and go back and forth from dock to attack, dock to attack. They do a bit of damage, run back, so on and so forth, and it does get a bit tedious. What you can do, however, is you can trade with players. Trade's probably the wrong word. Sharing is more accurate. You can request to use another player's ships, and as soon as they accept, they get to use your ships as well, which means you get access to not only higher level ships, but ships that you don't normally use. For example, I normally play fighters and interceptors, yet I could play a bomber if I wanted to, if an ally of mine accepted my invite. So if my ships are being repaired, I can request access to his secondary ship, and if he says yes, fine and dandy, I get access to a new ship, which is a pretty cool feature, though it still doesn't excuse the fact that they replace your ships with drones, and I don't entirely understand that. With only one type of cruiser and only one type of map, I think the game is a bit expensive for what it is. The map does change ever so slightly, however. There are 3 spaces from what I've read between the 2 ships, and these spaces are filled with modules, so you could have Derbis or asteroids or whatever, and these are placed randomly into the slots when the game begins. It's not all doom and gloom, however. I do enjoy the game. I enjoy it very much, and I hope it becomes very, very popular. I hope I gave you guys a nice idea what the game's about, and sorry for the lack of videos lately. I'm trying to get back into it now. I'll see you guys around next time.